Every time you got promoted, your body got worse. More money, more title always meant more belly fat and worse blood sugar management with your type 1 diabetes. So you climbed up the career ladder, but your body paid for it the whole way up. What I want you to understand is that this is not you slipping or being not ambitious enough, not consistent enough, in most cases, of course. Success itself changed your physiology. The responsibility and stress and pressure changed your physiology and chemistry. And today I'll walk you through the exact chain of how we go about this and how this happens, first of all, and what's the most important levers to pull to make sure you're losing and keeping off belly fat, and why it especially is at least twice important for you if you have type 1 diabetes, and what to do about it. First of all, let's talk about this paradox for a moment. It's crazy, right? So you're thinking, oh, I get promotions, or my business is growing, whatever you're doing specifically, I should have more power over my own time. I should be able to choose and focus on my health more and focus on my family more. But down the road, it's just getting harder for you to lose the belly fat. So it's essentially partly going in the opposite direction that you wanted it to go. But there's a reason for that, okay? It's not just in your head, or not just that you're weak or something like that, or just growing older or something like that. But it's that really, and I can give you an example of a study that has been done. There's like several reports showing that the most strained jobs, like the workers that had the most strain over, it was tracked for a couple of years, they gained the most weight, and especially carried most of it around the middle, like around the belly and torso, okay? So the stress of the role that they had moved the scale up. So that's essentially backed by science. It's not just experience-based. What this comes down to in most cases, and there's different angles of how we could think of it, of course, is that a promotion means more hours in most cases. And there's the typical examples of lawyers who, when they they get better at what they're doing, they have to take more cases, more hours, and make more difficult decisions. You could also, of course, also take other jobs, but also more responsibility. Let's say you're a physician and suddenly you're leading a certain department, like you're the chief physician, and suddenly you have way more responsibility, right? And you need to be in a lot of jobs also constantly available. So in most jobs, more, I think, like without an exception even, it's just different from job to job, of course, but a promotion and growing in business, let's call it like that, means more hours, more decisions, more responsibility. And even if it doesn't mean more hours because you have a business and you can outsource some of your work, it still means more responsibility and more pressure and bigger problems to solve. So there is more stress. I can't think of any branch, any business where, right, more like making more money and growing would mean less responsibility and less stress. And therefore, because of the increase in responsibility and stress and stuff, it also impacts your sleep. Okay, so that's what it means in all of the jobs, depending on what you're doing. Okay, and that reads as stress to the body. So there is more stress. Cortisol is our stress hormone. Okay, cortisol is the hormone that keeps you sharp and awake. So whenever there's a challenge and it's something that you've maybe not faced yet because it's something new, you're growing, literally, you got the promotion or business is growing, so you need to be sharp and awake to take care of the challenge. So there is a reason for that. There's a reason you are stressed. You are your cortisol is increasing. That's why I'm also such a big that's why I also don't like these statements like reduce your stress, like work on your stress levels. No, if you're ambitious, then the stress is there for a reason. Of course, right, there's ways of coping with stress in a negative way, in a positive way. That is there, of course, right? You can, of course, make it worse by having a bad attitude toward it and everything and talking yourself down. But I'm assuming that generally, if you already had some promotions and you got somewhere in your career, that you're generally able to manage stress and to cope with it in a productive way. So still, stress means you're more alert, you're more sharp, you're more awake, and you can like do great work in these periods when you're stressed. Okay, that's its job. Now, the issue with that is that high cortisol means that you're getting more resistant towards insulin. And this is not a black and white, not a switch on, switch off. It means that the more stress there is, the more insulin your pancreas needs to secrete and put in your body to do the same job, because you need insulin for various processes in the body. So it suddenly needs more insulin to do the same thing. But amongst others, and there's also other episodes that I've done on that, so check the other episodes. Amongst others, insulin leads also to you storing body fat, okay? Since insulin is that storage signal, your body, you can think of it like as parking energy faster and parking energy as fat. So it saves energy, especially belly fat. And stress fat is belly fat for a reason, okay? Because the fat around your organs has more, we could call it cortisol docking points, okay? So the more stress you have, the more insulin is being secreted. And especially since there is more of these cortisol receptors around your belly, that's where this stress is stored, right? Coming back to the study that I mentioned earlier, right? The more the workers with the highest workload and the most stress, they actually gained the most belly fat, okay? So the fat on your belly has more of these docking receptors, as for example the fat on your hips and thighs, okay? So the tendency will be that you will have more belly fat then as a result, okay? What's also wild, and there's a book if you're curious about that, if you're like interested in learning more, it's called Cortisol Connection, and it explains that mechanism in more detail than I'm doing it right now. But the belly fat itself has the characteristic that it produces more stress. So it's like this loop. It's like this vicious cycle of making it worse, because the more belly fat you have, the more cortisol it produces, because it makes its own cortisol, okay? Now with type 1 diabetes, and that's what I mentioned in the beginning, the reason it's at least, I would say, twice as hard, of course that's not something I measured or anything, or anyone measured, but the reason I'm saying anecdotally it's twice as hard is that with type 1 diabetes, you're obviously injecting with either a pump, a pen, or whatever, you're injecting your own insulin. So it's exogenous insulin as opposed to insulin coming from your own pancreas. Now that insulin is not going to the liver first, like the natural insulin that you're producing yourself, which is going to the liver and then is being distributed from there. The insulin that we're injecting is not going through your liver, and therefore is more like in a quicker way reaching your fat cells, leading to you storing belly fat, okay? So the whole blood sugar roller coaster that we have, especially if we don't manage the type 1 diabetes super well, then of course it gets even worse, because we then need to inject more insulin than if we were healthy, because we need to correct a high, right? 1, 2, maybe 3 times a day if it's bad, okay? So we need to correct our blood sugar, and therefore we're using more insulin throughout the day as if we were healthy, okay? So that's the next factor. And the whole stress loop that I explained before, because the way we got here is that the stress is what leads to more belly fat and leads to your body needing more insulin, therefore storing more fat. The whole stress is increased again by the blood sugar roller coaster, because every time your blood sugar dips, adrenaline, I just need to turn off my pump, adrenaline is being secreted and cortisol is being secreted to get your blood sugar back up. So it's another stress response on top of your work stress, long hours, sometimes little sleep if the work is affecting your sleep, and responsibility that you have. So it's just stacking up on top of each other. And that is, of course, something that makes it worse and turns into the loop that I described, okay? The next thing is that in most cases, right, based on my experience working with clients who getting promoted and having like a lot of responsibility in their jobs, is that promotions can steal your sleep, okay? So the stress is something that, with especially a lot of responsibility, we tend to take home more, because we can't switch off our brain. It's not that we're not business people and then suddenly we're like a private person. It's like we're just one human being, and it goes both ways. Like work is part of your life and your life is part of work, and we could also just call it life because it's all one. And therefore, of course, obviously, that increase in stress will also affect your sleep. That decrease in sleep, right? And that if you just have one night of 4 hours of sleep, measurably drops your insulin sensitivity in terms of increasing insulin resistance again for multiple days after just one night of bad sleep. And that's even in young and healthy people, okay? Again, studies done not just on people in their 30s, 40s, but even, right, people in their 20s have that issue, okay? So it's something that isn't because you're growing older, but it's because the effect on insulin sensitivity is big if you just have one night of like 4 hours of sleep where you just sleeping bad, okay? Meaning for the same food that you're eating, your blood sugar just goes higher, quicker, and you need more insulin to do the same job, like making it worse, right? So the next thing that sleep does is not just affecting your insulin sensitivity, but also affecting your hunger, right? So the more stress there is, the less you're feeling satiated after your meal, and the quicker you're feeling hungry and craving certain things. Okay, so you have more of these afternoon snack surges where you're feeling like, I deserve this, I want to have a snack now, which is something physiological. It's not because you have a weak mind, but it's literally something physiological. If someone that, I don't know, isn't working, theoretically isn't working and just spends their whole day doing other things, obviously will have less of these issues of cravings, and that's not because they have more willpower, it's because they have less stress. So it's a literal physiological response, okay? Now, I think the mechanisms are clear, right? Insulin resistance coming from stress, from the increase in responsibility due to you being promoted and therefore having more pressure, potentially longer hours, but definitely more responsibility. That increase in insulin resistance leads to more insulin in the body, whether you have type 1 diabetes or not, but especially with type 1 diabetes, the exogenous insulin is a thing, and the effect on the blood sugar roller coaster, because now with type 1 diabetes, right, when we have like a period with more insulin resistance, suddenly we need way more insulin, and then we have way more roller coaster, just going again in this loop that I described, plus the sleep that is being affected, making it worse again. Now, where we can do something is that most women are actually told in this situation, okay, it's just the stress, and then, right, you know, oh, okay, my stress leads to me having less time and being less healthy and so on and so forth. But that's not the whole story, because the levers that were important potentially before you got promoted in terms of, right, strength training, food, and what you're supposed to do to make sure you're losing body fat now are just even more important. So they don't change. Of course, the rules changed to an extent because you now have more stress, but it didn't take away what you can actually do about it. So it's still important. It's now even more important that you manage your time well and you take the time, even if it's short, 20-minute, 30-minute strength training sessions. And by the way, if you want to know specifically what kind of training you need to do, then send me a message via Instagram saying protocol, and I can send you a type 1 diabetic proof insulin and blood sugar stabilizing workout to make sure that you're improving the insulin sensitivity without adding further stress to your body. Okay, so definitely take care of that. It's a game changer. It's a golden nugget. So just send me that message and then you can start with that type of training. But what I'm saying here is that the training is now even more important, right? Doing that kind of training so that you're not, due to the stress and therefore losing muscle and eating too little or eating too much of the wrong things or eating too little of the right things in these stressful periods, to prevent your muscle from shrinking and therefore the insulin sensitivity from going down even further, to prevent that vicious circle. Now doing that strength training, even if it's short sessions, it's an absolute game changer, okay? But I'll get into the main levers in a second again, all right? So again, we want to do something about it, just the same than if we had less stress, but now the levers are even more important, and it's now even more important that these levers are not adding more stress to the equation. So it's important that you go and take care of proper stress management with both the food and the training, okay? So more restriction, just a stronger calorie deficit because you're not losing, or keto or fasting or no carb or paleo or whatever, you name it, will just make it worse. Weight Watchers, I don't know what shake kind of based diets you have done in the past. So these things will just make it worse. That's why being more strict will put more, we could call it fuel on the fire that is already there. All right. So what's actually helping is improving stress management. And as I said in the beginning, intentionally, I'm not saying reduce your stress. I'm saying manage your stress better. Okay. Protect your sleep like it's your salary, which means that in the last 2 hours before bed, you want to avoid close screens, okay? And if you have closed screens, put the brightness down. Make sure you have like this kind of true tone filter on iPhone, for example, up, but there's also softwares on laptop, for example, in case you need to do very late emails. I have actually a software, I can check how it's called. It's like the software that I'm using, I'm just looking at my laptop, is f.lux. It's a free software, you can install it, and then it will adapt, for example, the color of the screen to the daytime. So instead of having blue light at 10 p.m. at night in case you need to do emails, it's ideally there's just a filter, right? There's like a blue light filter, and it's more warm-ish, these kind of things, or blue blocker glasses for the last 2 hours of the day. That's one thing that you can do. Then also sleep at least before midnight, okay? Lights off at least before 12 a.m. If that's not if that's actually working, ideally it should be 10 p.m. in an ideal world. I understand with the family and the 10-hour day, that's not always possible, or never really possible. In that case, it should be 11 p.m. and worst case, it should be 12 a.m. Okay, so don't turn off the lights at 1 or 2 a.m. That's what I'm saying here. Now, that's what the stress management is about. Okay, it's like wind down the last hours before bed, have some carbs at night, but ideally have the last meal 4 hours before bed. So if you're turning off the lights by 11, then have the last meal at 7 p.m. That's something that's really important too, right? Manage stress better, steady blood sugar, especially with type 1 diabetes, right? Protein first mornings, protein first breakfast, but also throughout the day. With every meal you want some protein. You want to have smaller carb portions throughout the day to avoid the constant roller coaster, meaning 15-20 grams per snack per meal. And that's the strategy that will help keep your blood sugar steady. Wind down at night, because you have the dinner at like 4 hours before bed. This will also help steady the blood sugar curve before you go sleep, and then you can have an easy night. So these levers of the food timing, right, the what to eat throughout the day, strength training will be absolutely crucial in protecting your sleep, like I said. As I said, training-wise, like a busy person, not like a maniac. For that, if you want to know what specifically to do, send me that word protocol via Instagram. Also, if you can't find the time, or ideally make the time, you walk 10 minutes after most meals to flatten the spike, right? You pre-bolus the insulin for the respective carbohydrate amount, and then you want to take a walk, right? Also adjust the bolus, take that into consideration, communicate that also with your endo as well, right? How do I need to adjust my bolus before my meal if I'm taking a walk afterwards, right? What from experience worked a lot of cases is like 10, 20, 40, sometimes even 50% less, depending on the carbohydrate amount, less of insulin for the bolus if you're then taking a walk after. So these are the most important things to steady blood sugar throughout the day. Therefore, manage stress better and avoid the roller coaster, so you're energetic and can stick with that long term. I'll give you one client example, which is from Tui, who works 40 plus hours a week, 2 little children at home. So as you can imagine, she's busy, and she's also very ambitious. So she did 4+ training sessions a week for 2 years, and her weight didn't move at all. Okay. Now we implemented the things that I just walked you through, of course, adjusted that to her day to day and tailored the training specifically to where she's at and what she actually needs, depending on what she had done before, and made sure that this allows for optimal results. And in just 3 weeks, she dropped her A1C from 6.9 to 6.4. A1C is a 2 to 3 month average, right? So if that happened in just 3 weeks, then imagine what her A1C is, very likely under 6, very likely 5 point-ish something, after 3 months of testing. Now, as I said, right, in 3 weeks, 6 to 6.4, time and range to over 90% on many days. And also, she toned up, improved posture, and lost the first kilograms after 2 years of no change, by doing less than before, when it comes to the amount of time that she spent working out. Okay, so just an example. It's not about doing more and being more restrictive, but doing the right things, and if anything, taking things away that are just stressing on top of that, because that then helps improve the insulin sensitivity. And while I'm talking about the insulin sensitivity, she suddenly needed 2 units of insulin instead of 8, so just 20-25% of insulin of what she needed before. Okay, talking about insulin sensitivity. So that's what she did to then, right, tone up and make great progress, and as she says, turn her life around. So the things that I walk you through work, just need to do them consistently and prioritize them. And then down the road, especially if you're already ambitious and doing a lot, likely that will lead to you spending less time with fitness-related topics than you actually did before. Just to emphasize again, it's not about doing more, but it's about doing the right things. Let's wrap this up because we talked about a lot. Your success didn't break you, okay? So you're doing great, you're doing all right, but you now need to play by different rules, and that needs to reflect in your lifestyle. Okay, so the rules are not the same than if you were like in the beginning of your 30s, starting or your first, second corporate job, after the first promotion maybe. The rules now are different with more responsibility. You need to take better care of what you're doing so that you're not wasting your time, which is something you're also not doing at work. So why do it with your health? That you're doing things that are directed at what you need, that lead to you losing weight, improving blood sugar, and feeling at your best. All right. And if you're interested in seeing also what this would look like for you, if you want to make similar progress than Tui did, for example, and tailor this whole approach to you specifically, you can also, beside the keyword protocol, right, you can also send me the word reset on Instagram, and then I'll check if I can help, if we're a good fit, right, how this would look like for you specifically, and how we would tailor it to your day-to-day life. Otherwise, remember to scroll up as always, subscribe to the episode, give me a rating, and I'm looking forward to the next episode.